The diner was 2 blocks south of my apartment, and I had been coming here every Wednesday for 3 years, not because the coffee was good but because nobody from my family ever crossed the river to this side of town. Too many buses. Too many people who did not look like they belonged in the glossy brochures my mother kept stacked on the coffee table. Jenny slid a cup across the counter, the ceramic chipped on the rim the way it always was, and she did not ask how I was feeling because she already knew. "You look like you just walked out of a car wreck," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Worse," I said. "Court." She raised one eyebrow and let that sit between us for a moment. She was 52, divorced, and had been working the night shift since before I learned how to tie my shoes, and she never pushed for more than I was ready to give. She just refilled my coffee, topped it off with the burnt stuff from the back pot, and walked back to the grill where the eggs were rooting to smoke. I stirred my coffee and watched the cream swirl into the dark. My mother's face floated up in my mind, the way her lip had wobbled when the judge read the numbers out loud, not because she was sad but because she had been caught. I had spent my entire childhood watching her perform the role of the concerned mother, the long-suffering wife, the family matriarch who only wanted everyone to be happy if everyone stayed in their designated lanes. But difficult was just a word they used for girls who refused to stay small. My phone buzzed against the Formica counter, face up because I had stopped a ring. Who saw my screen? The name that lit up the display belonged to my brother Michael, and I had not seen it in 6 months, not since he called to tell me I was ruining Christmas by showing up late with store-bought pies instead of homemade. I let it ring. It rang again, and then a text message came through, the words glowing bright and accusatory. "Pick up the phone. We need to talk about what you did," I typed back with one thumb, slow and deliberate. "I did not do anything. I just stopped hiding." His response came before I could set the phone down. "You took the house. You took the money. You took everything Mom and Dad were going to give me." I read at that sentence for a long moment, and then I laughed out loud, loud enough that Jenny looked up from the grill with a questioning tilt of her head. I shook my head and pushed the phone across the counter toward her. She glanced at it, read the message, and snorted. "His inheritance," she said. "The one he has not earned." "Exactly. Your dad retired 3 years ago. What inheritance?" I shrugged and pulled the phone back. "He has been waiting since he was 12 years old. Dad told him he would get the business someday, and Michael built his whole life around that promise. Dropped out of college. Married the wrong woman. Divorced her. Crashed 2 cars. He just kept waiting for the money to show up so he did not have to do anything." Jenny slid a plate of toast toward me, the butter already melting into the corners. "And now he is angry because you got there first." "I did not get there first. I just got there." She nodded and walked away to tend to the grill. I sat there with the toast and the coffee and the quiet hum of the diner around me, and I thought about the question I had not been able to answer for most of my life. How had they convinced me for so long that I was the problem? I had believed it so hard that I almost did not save the money. I almost did not buy the apartment. I almost stayed small, the way they wanted, curled up in the corner of their expectations with no door of my own. But then I met someone who sat me down at this very counter, on this very stool, and told me I was not irresponsible. I was trapped. There was a difference. And that someone was the reason I had a folder full of bank statements and a judge who had looked at my parents with something close to pity. That someone was sitting 3 tables away, pretending to read a newspaper. I did not look at him. I did not have to. I knew his routine by heart. Every Wednesday at 7 o'clock, rain or shine, he walked through the door and ordered a black coffee and a slice of pie, and he sat in the corner booth and waited. He never rushed. He never checked his watch. He just sat there with his paper and his coffee and his quiet patience, and I had never once asked him why. I was always the one in a hurry. That was my mother's favorite complaint about me, the one she trotted out at every family gathering and every holiday dinner. "You rush into everything, Catherine." You do not think. You do not plan. That is why you keep failing. She had said it so many times that I had sta rude to hear her voice in my own head, a constant whisper telling me to slow down, to be ca refill, to wait for permission. But I had planned this. For 3 years, I had planned every deposit and every withdrawal and every document I would need. I had kept photocopies of everything in a fireproof box under my bed. I had hired a lawyer who specialized in family disputes, and I had paid him with money from my own checking account that nobody else knew existed. I had even paid extra for the expedited hearing because I knew my parents would try to delay. And still, when the judge read the numbers out loud, my father had looked at me like I had betrayed him. But I had not betrayed him. I had just stopped letting him betray me. Jenny came back and topped off my coffee. You want another cup? No, I said. I think I want pie. She smiled. Good choice. You net it. I slid off the stool and walked to the back corner booth, the one with the cracked vinyl and the salt shaker that never sat straight. David did not look up from his newspaper, but he pushed the salt shaker across the table toward the empty seat across from him, his way of telling me to sit down. I Saturday how bad, he asked, his voice low and quiet. Worse than I thought, I said. Better than I expected. He folded the newspaper and set it aside, his hand steady on the table. He was 41, an accountant at a firm 3 blocks north, and he had known me longer than anyone else in this city. He was also the only person who had ever told me the truth without dressing it up in soft words and gentle pauses. Your parents are going to fight this, he said. They are going to find a way to appeal. They are going to challenge the documents. They are going to drag this out for years if they think it will break you. I know. And your brother is going to come after you. Not legally. Emotionally. He will show up at your door and your job and that coffee shop you keep telling me you are going to quit but never do. I know. And they are going to tell everyone you really are. That you stole from them. That you manipulated the courts and forged signatures and ruined their lives. I know. David leaned back in the booth and studied me the way he studied a balance sheet, waiting for the numbers to make sense. So why do you look so calm? I thought about it. I thought about my mother's voice quavering on command in the courtroom. I thought about my father's hands gripping the table so hard his knuckles went white. I thought about the judge's face when he read the final document, the one that separated me from them forever, and I realized that the only thing I felt was relief. Because, I said, for the first time in my life, I am not sca rid of them anymore. He did not smile. He just nodded, slow and quiet, the way he did when he was turning something over in his mind. You know what I think. Tell me. I think they are not going to stop. I think they are going to come back, and they are going to bring your brother, and they are going to make your life miserable for a while. They are going to call you at all hours and send letters and show up at places you never expected. And I think that is going to be hard. I know. And I think you are still going to be okay. I picked up my fork and cut into the pie. Cherry, not my favorite, but the only kind left this late in the evening. It was tart and sweet, and it did not matter because I was eating it anyway, because I could eat whatever I wanted now, because I had paid for it with my own money and nobody could tell me I could not have it. Your parents spent your whole life making you feel like you could not survive without them, David said. They did it on purpose. Not because they hated you. Because they were sca rid of losing you. Sca rid of you becoming someone who did not need them. I know. But you do not need them now. You never did. You just needed to figure out that you were never the broken one. They were. I looked at him across the table, his face half lit by the fluorescent lights and the dim glow of the street outside. He was not trying to comfort me. He was telling me the plain truth, and I realized that was the only thing I had ever really wanted from anybody. Why are you saying this to me now? I asked. Because I think you are going to need to hear it, he said. In the next few weeks, they are going to try to make you feel small again. They are going to call you ungrateful. They are going to say you are destroying the family. And I need you to remember that you are not destroying anything. You are just building something for yourself. I did not respond. I did not have to. I finished the pie, set the fork down, and walked back to the counter where Jenny was wiping down the register with a rag that had seen better days. I am going to need a stronger coffee tomorrow, I said. She grinned. You got it. And Jenny, yeah, you were right. I did the right thing. She nodded once, short and firm, and I walked out of the diner into the cold night air. The street was quiet and the buildings were dark, and somewhere in the distance a train was pulling into the station, its whistle low and mournful. I thought about my mother sitting in her living room right now, making phone calls to my aunt and my uncle and anyone who would listen, telling them that her daughter had betrayed her. I thought about my father pacing the floor, trying to find a loophole, calling his own lawyer and demanding a ring. I thought about my brother, angry and directionless, still waiting for the life that was never going to arrive. I walked up the steps to my building, old but clean, with a landlord who did not ask questions and neighbors who kept to themselves. I unlocked the door and stepped inside and closed it behind me, and the sound of the lock clicking into place felt like the only real thing that had happened all day. The apartment was small and cramped and really big enough for a microwave, but it had a window that faced west so I could watch the sunset every night, and it had a lock that only I had the key to. I sat down on the couch and pulled out my phone. 3 new texts. One from my brother, you just destroyed this family. One from my uncle, you will get what is coming to you. And one from David, sent just a few minutes ago, dinner tomorrow my treat. I typed back, no. My treat. Then I turned the phone off and sat there in the dark, and I let myself breathe for the first time in as long as I could remember. The phone buzzed again at 7 in the morning, and I fumbled for it on the nightstand, still half asleep and tangled in the sheets. The screen glowed with a number I did not recognize, and I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Hello, this message is for Catherine Walsh. The voice was clipped and professional, the kind of voice that had never spilled coffee on a white shirt or missed a deadline. My name is Margaret Ellison. I am the attorney representing your parents in the matter of the conservatorship hearing. I am calling to inform you that we have filed an appeal. I will be in touch with further details. Please do not attempt to contact your parents directly in the meantime. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat up in bed and read at the wall, the phone still rm against my ear. An appeal. Of course they had filed an appeal. My father was not the type to accept defeat gracefully. He was the type to double down and dig his heels in and refuse to let go of anything he considered his, even when the evidence proved otherwise. The hearing had ended just yesterday, and already they were fighting back, already they were trying to undo everything the judge had decided. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and padded into the kitchen, the floor cold against my bare feet. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove, and while I waited for the water to boil, I called my lawyer. I got the voicemail, I said when he picked up. They are appealing. I know, he said. They called me too. They are claiming you submitted fraudulent documents. They are saying you paid someone to alter the bank records and forge the property deed. That is impossible. I know it is impossible. I also know that they do not have to prove it right now. They just have to make enough noise to get a second hearing. They want to drag this out. They want to exhaust you financially and emotionally until you give up and walk away. I am not giving up. I did not think you would. But I need you to understand what we are dealing with. Their lawyer, Margaret Ellison, is known for this. She picks cases like yours and turns them personal. She will look for any inconsistency, any mistake, any moment of hesitation. She will use your family against you, and she will make you sound like the villain in your own story. I do not have any inconsistencies. Then you have nothing to worry about. But I would still be ca reful. They are going to come after you hardy, Catherine. They are going to make this as painful as possible because they want you to break. I hung up and poured the boiling water over the coffee grounds, and I stood there in the quiet kitchen watching the steam curl tower the ceiling. The apartment felt smaller than it had yesterday, the walls pressing in a little closer. I had won the first battle, but the war was just beginning, and my parents had never been the kind of people who knew how to lose. I got dressed and went to work. The non-profit was a low-slung building on the edge of town, with peeling paint and a reception desk that had been salvaged from a church basement. I had worked there for NARLYTRS, helping families navigate the foster CARE system, and it paid just enough to keep me comfortable. Carla, my boss, was already at her desk when I walked in, her reading glasses perched on her nose and a stack of case files spread out in front of her. You look exhausted, she said without looking up. I am fine. She glanced at me over the top of her glasses, and I could see her weighing whether to ask more questions. She was 48 with 4 kids and a husband who traveled for work, and she had learned long ago that some people needed space more than they needed sympathy. She nodded once and returned to her paperwork. The morning passed in the usual rhythm of phone calls and emails and meetings. I helped a young couple fill out the paperwork for a foster placement, a teenage boy whose mother had lost custody after a series of bad decisions. I reviewed case files and made notes and drank 3 cups of the terrible office coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. It was normal and boring and exactly what I needed, a reminder that the world kept turning no matter what was happening in courtrooms and lawyers' offices. And then my mother walked through the front door. I saw her through the glass before she pushed it open, her silhouette framed against the gray morning light. She was wearing a coat I had never seen before, a camel-colored wool thing that probably cost more than my rent, and she was holding her handbag with both hands like she was going to church. Her face was calm and composed, the same face she had worn for every school conference and every family dinner and every holiday gathering where she had to pretend everything was fine. I pushed my chair back and walked to the door, stepping outside before she could come all the way in. The cold air hit my face and I closed the door behind me, standing on the cracked concrete step with my arms crossed over my chest. Mom. You cannot be here. She stopped a few feet away, her heels clicking against the pavement. I am not here to fight, Catherine. I just want to talk. We do not have anything to talk about. Catherine, please. I am still your mother. I looked at her then, really looked, and I saw the lines around her eyes that had not been there a few years ago, the gray in her hair she had stopped bothering to dye. Her hands were shaking just slightly, the way they always did when she was trying to hold on to something she was about to lose. I am going to give you 1 minute, I said. Say what you came to say, and then you have to leave. She took a breath and straightened her shoulders. I know you think we did this to hurt you. That we wanted to control you and take everything away. That is not true. We were trying to protect you. You are our daughter, and we love you, and we did not want to see you make the same mistakes you have always made. You were trying to protect yourselves. That is not fair. It is fair, Mom. It is the truth. You did not want me to have money because you knew I would use it to leave. You wanted me to stay close so you could keep an eye on me. So you could keep me where you wanted me. She flinched, a tiny crack in her composed exterior. You do not understand, she said, her voice rising just a little. Your father and I gave you everything. We paid for your school. We helped you when you were struggling. We never stopped trying to help you. Every time you made a mistake, we were there to pick up the pieces. We were always there. You sent me checks I never cashed. You bought me clothes I never wore. You paid for vacations I never took. Not because you loved me. Because you wanted to prove that I could not take care of myself. You wanted to hold the receipts so you could wave them in my face later. Her mouth opened and closed, and for a moment she looked almost lost, like she had walked into a room and forgotten why she was there. Catherine, please. Stop. Just stop. She stood there frozen, her handbag clutched against her chest like a shield. A cold wind blew between us and I pulled my jacket tighter, but I did not step back inside. I am going to say this once, I said. I do not hate you. I do not even hate Dad. But you need to understand something. I have been fighting for my own life since I was 16 years old. Every time I got close to making it on my own, you pulled me back. You told me I was not ready. You told me I was making a mistake. And I believed you. For a long time, I really believed you. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I am done believing, I said. I have my own life. I have my own money. I have my own choices. And you do not get to control any of it anymore. I turned and walked back inside, and I closed the door behind me before she could respond. Through the glass, I watched her stand there for a long moment, her face pale and stricken. Then she turned and walked slowly back to her car, her heels clicking against the pavement in an uneven rhythm. I leaned against the door and let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. The office was quiet, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Carla was watching me from her desk, her expression unreadable. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. I think I am. I walked back to my desk and sat down, and I read at the stack of case files in front of me without really seeing them. My mother's face was still in my mind, the way she had looked at me when I told her I was done believing. There was no triumph in it, no satisfaction. Just a hollow emptiness where the anger used to be. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to David. She came to my work. His response came back a few seconds later. Do you want to talk about it? I read at the screen for a long moment, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard. No, I typed. I just want to be alone. Okay. I will be here when you are ready. I put the phone down and picked up the next case file, and I went back to work. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended quiet. I went to work, came home, made dinner, slept. My mother did not call again, and neither did my father. The silence felt heavier than the noise had been, like the air before a thunderstorm when everything goes still and the sky turns green. I found myself checking my phone more often than I wanted to admit, waiting for the next blow to land. It came on a Thursday afternoon. I was at the kitchen sink, scrubbing a pan that had been soaking since the night before, when someone knocked on the door. 3 short raps, firm and official. I dried my hands and walked over, and when I opened the door, a man in a plain suit handed me a thick stack of papers and walked away without a word. He did not introduce himself. He did not need to. I had seen process servers before, in the movies and on television, and I knew exactly what this meant. I closed the door and sat down on the couch, the papers spread across my lap. My parents had filed a full appeal, just as my lawyer had warned me they would. They were contesting everything now, every document and every signature and every piece of evidence I had submitted. They were claiming I had forged the bank statements, altered the property records, fabricated the entire paper trail to make myself look more independent than I actually was. It was a desperate argument, thin and full of holes, but it was enough to get a second hearing. And then I turned to the last page, and my stomach dropped. They had added something new. Something I had not expected. They were claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. Not financially irresponsible. Not immature. Unfit. They had submitted a letter from a doctor I had never met, a psychologist whose name I did not recognize, and the letter was 3 pages long. It was full of clinical language and official-sounding jargon, words like borderline impulsivity and emotional dysregulation and pattern of self-sabotaging behavior. Everything my parents had told me about myself my whole life, now dressed up in medical terms and stamped with a doctor's signature. I read through the letter twice, and then a third time, and each time I felt the same cold knot tightening in my chest. They were not just trying to take my money anymore. They were trying to take my sanity. They were trying to convince a judge that I could not be trusted to make my own decisions, that I was broken in some fundamental way that required outside control. I set the papers down and called my lawyer. Did you read it? He asked when he picked up. I read it. I have seen this before, he said. It is a common tactic in cases like this. They are trying to build a case that you are not competent to manage your own affairs. If they succeed, the judge could reverse the ruling and appoint a conservator. Not your parents, probably, they will ask for someone neutral, but someone to manage your assets on your behalf. They cannot do that. They can try. And they have a doctor's letter. That is a problem. It is a fraud. I have never been to that doctor. I have never even heard of him. I know. But proving that is going to take time and money, and in the meantime, they are going to make your life very difficult. They are going to file motions and request continuances and drag this out as long as they can. They want you to get tired. They want you to give up. I am not giving up. I know. But I need you to be prepared for what is coming. This is going to get ugly. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time, the papers scattered across the coffee table like evidence of a crime I had not committed. The apartment felt smaller than it had before, the walls closing in, and I could not shake the feeling that my parents had somehow found a way to reach into my life and take hold of it again. The next morning, I went to work as usual. I answered emails and reviewed case files and helped a woman fill out the paperwork for a kinship placement. I did everything I normally did, and I did it with the same calm professionalism I had always brought to the job, but inside I was coiled tight as a spring. Every phone call made me jump. Every person who walked through the front door made me look up. And then my brother Car pulled up outside. I saw it through the window, the familiar blue sedan with the dent in the passenger side door. Michael got out and stood on the sidewalk, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, and he looked at the building like he was trying to decide whether to come in. I walked to the door before he could make up his mind, stepping outside into the cold morning air. Michael. What are you doing here? He shrugged, that same realist gesture he had been making since we were kids. I wanted to talk to you. Mom said you would not answer her calls. You cannot just show up at my work. Funny. You said the same thing to Mom, and she did it anyway. Guess it runs in the family. I crossed my arms and waited. He was my brother, older by 3 years, and we had never been close. He had always been the golden child, the one my parents invested their hopes in, the one they bailed out of every mistake and every bad decision. And I had always been the difficult one, the one who could not be trusted, the one who needed to be managed and controlled. You need to drop the appeal, I said. You need to tell Mom and Dad to stop this. He laughed, a short bark of a sound. Drop the appeal, Catherine, that money was supposed to come to me. It was supposed to be mine. You just walked in and took it, and now you want me to tell them to stop fighting. The money was never theirs to give you. It was mine. I earned it. Earned it how working at that little non-profit selling coffee you did not earn anything. You just got lucky. I looked at him for a long moment, and I saw the anger in his eyes, the resentment that had been building for years. He was not angry because he thought I had done something wrong. He was angry because I had something he wanted, and he did not know how to get it without our parents giving it to him. Michael, I said, what do you do for a living? He blinked. What is your job? What do you do every day? I am in between things right now. You know that. Right. You are in between things. You have been in between things for 5 years. You do not have a car because you crashed the last one. You do not have a house because you lost it in the divorce. You do not have anything, Michael. Not because I took it from you. Because you never built anything in the first place. He went pale, his face losing all its color. You do not know anything about my life. I know you spent your whole life expecting things to be handed to you. I know you are angry because I took the last thing you thought was yours. But it was never yours. It was always mine. And I earned every single penny of it. He did not respond. He just stood there, gripping the collar of his jacket, his jaw tight and his eyes fixed on something in the distance. Go home, I said. Do not come here again. I turned and walked back inside, and I did not look back. Through the glass, I saw him stand there for a long moment, frozen and uncertain. Then he got back into his car and drove away, and I watched the blue sedan disappear around the corner. Carla came up beside me, her coffee mug in her hand. That your brother? Yeah. He looks like a mess. I nodded. He always has been. I went back to my desk and sat down, and I read at the stack of case files without really seeing them. My mother. My father. My brother. They were all circling now, closing in from every direction, and I could feel the walls of my fully built life rooting to tremble. But I had come too far to let them tear it all down. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to David. The appeal is moving 4-way road. They added a doctor's letter. His response came back a few seconds later. We will get through this. One step at a time. I typed back. I know. I just wish they would stop. He sent a single word in reply. They will. Eventually, I put the phone down and went back to work, and I tried to believe that was true. The appeal hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks away, and I spent every one of those weeks preparing. My lawyer and I met twice a week at his office, a cramped space above a dry cleaner's, with files spread across every available surface and coffee cups growing cold on the windowsill. We went through every document I had submitted for the original hearing, checking dates and signatures and bank statements until I could recite the numbers in my sleep. We found the original property deed, the one with my name alone, no cosigner and no secondary lien. We found the tax returns that showed I had claimed the apartment as my primary residence for 3 consecutive years. We found the deposit slips from every single check my parents had sent me, every single one deposited into a savings account and never touched. You have a paper trail that is almost impossible to dispute, my lawyer said one afternoon, leaning back in his chair and rubbing his eyes. The problem is not the evidence. The problem is that they are going to attack you personally. They are going to make this about your character, not your finances. I nodded. I had already figured that out myself. The doctor's letter was proof enough of their strategy. They were not trying to prove I had forged documents. They were trying to prove I was crazy, unstable, incapable of making sound decisions. They were trying to make me sound like the kind of person who could not be trusted with her own life. We need to find out more about that doctor, I said. The one who wrote the letter. I need to know how they found him, what he was told, whether he has done this before. My lawyer made a note on his pad. I will have my investigator look into it. In the meantime, I want you to write down everything you remember about your financial history. Every job, every bank account, every major purchase. I want a timeline from the day you turned 18 to the present. I went home that night and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen, and I wrote. I wrote with my first job, a waitressing gig at a diner not unlike Jenny's, where I made minimum wage and saved every tip I could. I wrote about the community college classes I took at night, the ones my parents had told me were a waste of money because I would never finish anything I root. I wrote about the apartment I rented with 3 other girls, the one with the leaky roof and the landlord who never fixed the heat. I wrote about the day I walked into the bank and opened my first savings account with $400 money I had saved over 6 months of working double shifts. I wrote about the coffee shop where I worked after college, the one my parents said was beneath me, the one where I met David for the first time. I wrote about the morning I walked into the bank with the down payment for my apartment, the teller's surprised face when I handed over the cashier's check. I wrote about the moment I signed the deed, the pen slippery in my hand, the weight of the paper in my fingers. I wrote for 3 hours, filling page after page, and when I was done I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The evidence was there, written in my own hand, a record of every step I had taken to build a life my parents had never believed I could build. David came over that night, as he had been doing almost every night since the appeal was filed. He sat in my kitchen and watched me work, a cup of coffee in his hands, and he did not ask questions. He just sat there, patient and steady, waiting for me to be done. You look tired, he said. I am tired. Maybe you should take a break. I shook my head. I cannot stop. If I stop, I will think about everything. And if I think about everything, I will fall apart. He did not push. He just sat there, his presence a quiet anchor in the middle of the storm. I went back to my notes, checking dates and cross-referencing bank statements, and I did not stop until my eyes root to blur. The next day, my lawyer called with news about the doctor. His name is Dr. Raymond Foster, my lawyer said. He practices in a neighboring state, about 3 hours from here. He has been a licensed psychologist for 15 years, but his specialty is not clinical evaluation. He does court-ordered assessments for child custody cases. This is the first time he has ever been involved in a conservatorship hearing. What did my parents tell him that is the interesting part? According to his notes, he interviewed your mother and father separately. He also interviewed your brother and your uncle. But he never met with you. He never even tried. That is what the judge already heard at the first hearing. Yes. But now we have his full report, and it is even more damning than the letter they submitted. He wrote that you refused to participate in the evaluation. He wrote that you were hostile and uncooperative. He wrote that your family described a pattern of erratic behavior dating back to your teenage years. That is a lie. I know it is a lie. But it is in writing, and it is signed by a licensed psychologist. We are going to have to call him as a witness at the appeal hearing. We are going to have to make him admit, under oath, that he never spoke to you. I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my apartment. The walls felt closer than they had before, and I could feel the weight of my parents' strategy pressing down on me. They had spent my whole life telling people I was difficult, unstable, unreliable. Now they had found a professional to say the same thing, and they had put it in a document that a judge would read. I called David and told him what I had learned. He is going to testify, David asked. Probably. My lawyer is going to try to have him disqualified, but if that does not work, he will be on the stand. Then you will have to be ready. You will have to sit there and listen to everything they say about you, and you will have to stay calm. I know. You can do this, Catherine. You have been doing it your whole life. I thought about that. He was right. I had been doing this my whole life, sitting in rooms full of people who had already decided I was the problem, keeping my voice steady and my face still while they told me everything that was wrong with me. I had done it with my parents and my brother and my uncle. I had done it with teachers and bosses and landlords who did not want to rent to a young woman with no cosigner. I could do it one more time. The weeks passed in a blur of preparation. I met with my lawyer twice a week. I reviewed documents and made notes and practiced my testimony. I went to work and came home and slept, and every morning I woke up and did it all over again. The appeal hearing was always there, a dark cloud on the horizon, growing closer with every passing day. The night before the hearing, I got a call from Jenny. I heard what they are trying to do, she said. My sister's neighbor knows someone who works at that doctor's office. They are saying your parents paid him extra to write that letter. They are saying he does this kind of thing all the time. I know. My lawyer found out about it. Then you are ready for tomorrow. I looked out the window at the dark street below, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. I think so, I said. I have to be. You are going to be fine, Catherine. You have always been fine. They just never wanted to see it. I hung up and sat in the quiet, and I tried to believe that she was right. The appeal was tomorrow. My parents and their lawyer and the doctor would all be there, and they would do everything they could to tear down everything I had built. But I had the truth on my side. I had the documents and the bank statements and the deed to my apartment. I had 3 years of independence, 3 years of proving that I could manage my own life. And I had David, sitting in my kitchen, drinking his coffee and waiting for me to be done. Are you SCA red? He asked. Yes, I said. I think that is okay. It is okay. Being SCA red does not mean you are weak. It just means you are paying attention. I nodded and went back to my notes, and I did not stop until the pages blurred and my eyes grew heavy. Tomorrow would come soon enough. The courtroom was the same one as before, same oak-paneled walls, same tired-eyed judge, same fluorescent lights that hummed low overhead. But this time the gallery was full. My parents had brought reinforcements. My aunt sat in the second row, her arms crossed and her mouth set in a tight line. My uncle was beside her, the same uncle who had written the character reference calling me unstable and financially reckless. My cousin sat in the back, scrolling through her phone, trying to look like she did not want to be there. And in the front row, just behind the plaintiff's table, sat my brother. Michael did not look at me when I walked in. He kept his eyes fixed on the back of my mother's head, his hands folded in his lap. My mother was wearing a navy blue suit, the same one she had worn to every important event in my childhood, and my father was beside her in a tie that looked like he had tied it himself in the dark. They looked prepper red. They looked like they had been rehearsing this moment for weeks. I sat down at the defendant's table next to my lawyer, and I placed my folder of documents in front of me. The weight of it was familiar by now, the heft of 3 years of CA refill record keeping, and I rested my hands on top of it and tried to steady my breathing. The judge opened the proceedings with a short statement. This court is reconvening to hear the plaintiff's appeal of the previous ruling in the matter of the conservatorship petition. The plaintiffs have submitted new evidence, including a psychiatric evaluation, which they argue demonstrates that the defendant is not capable of managing her own financial affairs. The defendant has filed a response. We will hear arguments from both sides. Marga Rhett Ellison rose from her seat, crisp and professional, her heels clicking against the floor as she walked to the center of the room. She was shorter than I had expected, with sharp features and glasses that caught the light, and she spoke with the calm precision of someone who had done this 100 times before. Your Honor, she said, the plaintiffs are here today not to punish their daughter, but to protect her. Miss Walsh has a long history of impulsive decision-making and financial instability. Her parents have spent years trying to support her, only to be met with hostility and ingratitude. They are asking this court to appoint a neutral conservator to manage her assets, not because they want to control her, but because they genuinely believe she is incapable of managing them herself. My lawyer rose to respond. Your Honor, the plaintiffs have submitted a psychiatric evaluation from a doctor who never met with my client. That evaluation was based entirely on second-hand accounts provided by the plaintiffs themselves, accounts that are contradicted by the documented evidence of Miss Walsh's financial history. She has been managing her own affairs for 3 years without assistance. She purchased a property independently. She has maintained steady employment. The evidence does not support the plaintiff's claim. The judge looked at the doctor, who was seated in the gallery near the back. Dr. Foster, you submitted the evaluation in question. Can you explain why you did not interview the defendant personally? The doctor stood, adjusting his tie. He was a thin man with a receding hairline and wire-rimmed glasses, and he did not look comfortable being called out in front of a full courtroom. Your Honor, I was told by the plaintiffs that Miss Walsh was too unstable to participate. I was also told that she had refused previous attempts at evaluation. Based on that information, I proceeded with interviews with the family members. And those interviews formed the basis of your diagnosis? Yes, Your Honor. Did you ever attempt to contact Miss Walsh directly? The doctor shifted his weight. No, Your Honor. I did not. The judge made a note on his pad and turned back to Marga Rhett Ellison. Counselor, your witness has just admitted that his evaluation was based on hearsay. Do you have any additional evidence to support your claim? Ellison did not waver. Your Honor, the plaintiffs also have testimony from family members who have witnessed Miss Walsh's behavior firsthand. They can speak to her pattern of impulsive decisions and erratic behavior over a period of many years. Then call your witnesses. My mother was the first to take the stand. She walked to the witness box with the same composed grace she had always carried, her hands folded in front of her, her face serene. She raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth, and I watched her closely, looking for the cracks I knew were there. Mrs. Walsh, Ellison began, can you describe your daughter's behavior during her teenage years? My mother nodded, her voice soft and trembling. Catherine was always difficult. She never listened. She made impulsive decisions that put herself at risk. She ran away from home twice. She dropped out of school. She refused to follow any kind of structure or routine. Did you try to help her? We tried everything. We sent her to therapy. We enrolled her in programs. We gave her money and support and guidance. Nothing ever worked. She always pushed us away. And what about her financial behavior? Has she ever demonstrated the ability to manage her own money? My mother paused, and I saw her eyes flicker toward me for just a moment. Then she looked back at the lawyer. She has never been good with money. She spends impulsively. She refuses to stick to a budget. We have been supplementing her income for years because she could not make ends meet on her own. My lawyer stood up. Your Honor, I object. The plaintiffs have submitted bank statements showing that Miss Walsh deposited every check they sent her into a savings account. She never cashed a single one. The assertion that she could not make ends meet is contradicted by the evidence. The judge looked at my mother. Mrs. Walsh, is it true that your daughter deposited your checks without cashing them? My mother's composure cracked, just slightly. I do not know. I assumed she needed the money. You assumed. Yes, Your Honor. The judge made another note and turned to my lawyer. You may cross-examine. My lawyer walked to the witness box and stood in front of my mother, his voice calm and unhurried. Mrs. Walsh, you testified that your daughter has always been irresponsible with money. Can you give me one specific example of a financial decision she made that was irresponsible? My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. She bought a car once without consulting us. She overpaid for it. Overpaid by how much? I do not remember the exact amount. Was it more than the appartement she purchased independently? The appartement that has appreciated in value by 20% since she bought it. My mother's hands tightened on the railing of the witness box. That was a different situation. Was it your daughter bought a car without your approval, and you called that irresponsible? She bought an appartement with her own money, and you called that irresponsible too. What would she have to do to earn your approval? My mother did not answer. She just sat there, her face pale, her hands trembling on the railing. My father was next. He gave similar testimony, stumbling over his words when my lawyer pressed him for specifics. He could not name a single example of financial irresponsibility that was not contradicted by the evidence. He could not explain why, if I was so incapable, I had managed to save enough money to buy a property outright. Michael was called after my father, but he refused to answer most of the questions. He sat in the witness box with his arms crossed, his jaw tight, his answers short and defensive. He admitted, under cross-examination, that he had never held a job for more than 6 months. He admitted that he had been living with my parents on and off for the past 3 years. He admitted that he had expected to inherit the money my parents had set aside. So, my lawyer said, you are here today to testify that your sister is irresponsible with money. But you have never held a steady job. You have never managed a household budget. You have never purchased a property. Is that correct? Michael's face reddened. That is not the point. Then what is the point, Mr. Walsh? He did not answer. The doctor was called last. He testified that he had based his evaluation on interviews with the family, and he admitted, under questioning, that he had never verified any of the claims they had made. He admitted that he had not requested any financial records or spoken to any of my employers. He admitted that he had written his report based entirely on what my parents had told him. Dr. Foster, my lawyer said, is it standard practice in your field to make a diagnosis without ever meeting the patient? No, the doctor said quietly. And yet you did exactly that in this case. I was told the patient was unauthorized. You were told. And you did not verify that information with anyone else. No. I did not. The judge closed his notebook and looked at the room. I have enough. The plaintiffs have failed to provide credible evidence that Miss Walsh is unable to manage her own affairs. The evaluation submitted by Dr. Foster is based entirely on hearsay and is therefore inadmissible. The appeal is denied. The original ruling stands. My mother made a sound, a choked sob, and my father reached for her hand. Michael stood up abruptly and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. I sat at the defendant's table and let the words sink in. It was over. The appeal was denied. I had won again. I gathered my folder and walked out of the courtroom, past my aunt and my uncle and my cousin, past the doctor who had written his report without ever meeting me. I did not look at my parents. I did not need to. Outside, the sun was bright and ordinary, and I stood on the courthouse steps and let the light hit my face. David was waiting at the bottom of the steps, his hands in his pockets, his face calm and quiet. It is over, I said. It is over, he agreed. We stood there together, and I did not look back at the courthouse doors. I did not need to. The courthouse steps felt different now. The sun was the same and the air was the same and the traffic moved along the street in the same steady hum, but the weight that had been pressing on my chest for 6 weeks had finally lifted. I stood there with David beside me, and I let myself breathe. Where do you want to go? He asked. The diner, I said. I need coffee. He nodded and we walked together, our footsteps falling into the same rhythm. The streets were familiar and the buildings were familiar and everything looked exactly the way it had looked when I walked into the courthouse that morning, but everything felt different. I had won. I had beaten them. I had stood in front of a judge in a room full of people who had come to tear me down, and I had walked out with my head high. Jenny was behind the counter when we walked in, and she took one look at my face and sta root pouring coffee without asking. You look like you just survived a war, she said, sliding the cup across the counter. Close, I said. I just won a battle. The war is not over. I shook my head. It will never be over. That is the thing about families. They do not stop. They just change shape. She nodded and wiped her hands on her apron. I know. I am still fighting with my ex-husband, and he has been dead for 3 years. I laughed. It came out tired and hollow, but it was real. I slid onto a stool and wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic cup. David sat beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, and neither of us spoke for a long moment. I thought it would feel different, I said finally. Different how? More satisfying. More final. I thought I would walk out of that courtroom and feel like I had won something permanent. But it just feels like I am still here. Still the same person. Still living the same life. David stirred his coffee. That is because winning does not change who you are. It just confirms what you already knew. And what is that? That you were right. That you were never the problem. That they were. I looked at him across the counter, his face half lit by the fluorescent lights. He said it so simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, and I realized that I had been waiting my whole life for someone to say those words and mean them. Thank you, I said. For what? For being here. For sitting with me. For not asking questions. He shrugged. That is what people do for each other. The diner was quiet, the late afternoon lull between lunch and dinner. Jenny was stacking cups behind the counter and a single customer sat in the corner booth with a plate of eggs and a newspaper. The world was going about its business, and I was sitting in the middle of it, still breathing, still standing. I thought about my mother's face in the courtroom. The way she had looked at me when the judge denied the appeal. Not angry. Not sad. Just empty. Like she had run out of things to feel. I thought about my father, sitting beside her with his hands folded, his knuckles white. I thought about Michael, walking out of the courtroom without a word, without a glance. They were still my family. They would always be my family. But they were not my life anymore. Jenny, I called out across the counter. Can I get another cup? Coming right up. She refilled my coffee and I sat there with the warmth in my hands, and I let myself feel the quiet relief of being done. The appeal was over. The doctors and the lawyers and the witnesses were gone. There was nothing left to fight. David finished his coffee and set the cup down. What are you going to do now? I thought about it. I thought about my job and my appointment and the small, steady life I had built. I thought about the months of preparation, the sleepless nights, the constant weight of waiting for the next attack. It was over now, but I did not know what came next. Stay, I said. I think I am just going to stay. That sounds like a plan. It is not much of a plan. It does not have to be. You have done enough planning for a while. He was right. I had spent 6 weeks planning and preparing and rehearsing, and now it was time to stop. To sit still. To let the dust settle. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. There were messages waiting, but I did not open them. I knew what they would say. My mother, calling to tell me I had destroyed the family. My brother, sending threats and accusations. My uncle, reminding me that I would get what was coming to me. I put the phone back in my bag without reading a single word. Are you going to answer those? David asked. No, I said. Not today. He nodded. Good. You do not have to. The diner door opened and a family walked in, 2 parents and a little girl with a pink backpack. They found a booth near the window and ordered pancakes and juice and bacon. The father paid with a credit card and left a tip that was too small, and the mother wiped syrup off the girl's face with a napkin, and they walked out into the afternoon light. I watched them go. They looked happy. Normal. Ordinary. I had never had that kind of family. Maybe I never would. You are sta ring, David said. I am thinking. About what it would have been like to grow up in a house where nobody was keeping score. Where nobody was waiting for you to fail so they could prove they were right about you. He did not answer right away. He just sat there, his coffee cup cradled in his hands. You cannot change where you came from. You can only change where you are going. I knew he was right. I had known it for a long time. But he rang it out loud, spoken in his quiet, steady voice, made it feel real. I finished my coffee and slid off the stool. I should go home. I need to sleep. I will walk you. We walked back through the quiet streets, past the shops and the apartment buildings and the houses with their porch lights already rooting to glow. The sun was setting, low and orange, casting long shadows across the pavement. When we reached my building, David stopped at the bottom of the steps. You are going to be okay, he said. I know. Call me if you need anything. I will. I walked up the steps and unlocked the door, and I turned back to look at him one last time. He was standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets, the fading light catching the edges of his face. Thank you, I said. For everything. You do not have to thank me. I know. But I wanted to. He nodded and turned to walk away, and I closed the door behind me and leaned against it in the quiet of my apartment. The walls were the same and the windows were the same and the faded couch was the same, but it felt different now. Smaller, maybe. Or bigger. I could not tell which. I walked to the window and looked out at the street below. The sun was almost gone, the sky deepening from orange to purple to black. A few blocks away, I could see the lights of the diner, warm and welcoming in the arcade. I pulled out my phone and turned it on. Messages scrolled across the screen, more than I had expected. My mother had called 6 times. My brother had sent 4 texts. My uncle had left a voicemail. I deleted them all without listening. Then I sent a single text to David. I am okay. His response came back a few seconds later. I know. I put the phone down and sat on the couch, and I let the quiet settle around me like a blanket. Tomorrow would come and the world would keep turning and my parents would still be angry and my brother would still be resentful. But that was their problem now. Not mine. I had one. I had built something they could not take away. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. 6 months passed. The world did not end. The sun rose every morning and set every evening, and I woke up in my small apartment and went to work and came home and slept, and somewhere along the way, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long began to lift. I still went to the diner on Wednesday nights. Jenny still poured my coffee and slid plates of toast across the counter, and she still did not ask questions she already knew the answers to. David still sat in the corner booth with his newspaper and his black coffee, and I still walked over and sat down across from him, and we talked about nothing and everything in equal measure. There were no more calls from my mother. No more texts from my brother. No more letters from my uncle. The silence was strange at first, like the quiet after a storm when you keep waiting for the thunder to start again. But as the weeks stretched into months, I stopped waiting. Root living. I woke up one morning and realized I had not thought about my parents in 3 days. It was not a deliberate choice. It just happened. I was making coffee and looking out the window and thinking about what I needed to do that day, and it took me a moment to notice that they were not there in my head the way they used to be. The constant hum of their voices, the endless loop of their expectations and accusations and disappointments, had faded to something barely audible. I went to work that day with a lighter step. Carla noticed. She looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "You look different." "I feel different," I said. Good different. She nodded and went back to her paperwork, and I sat down at my desk and wrote my day. The case files were the same and the phone calls were the same and the office coffee was still terrible, but I did not mind any of it. It was mine. It was ordinary. It was exactly what I had been fighting for. David and I had settled into a rhythm that was comfortable and easy. We did not need to talk about the past. We did not need to plan the future. We just were. He came over on Sunday afternoons and helped me fix the kitchen faucet that kept dripping. I went to his apartment on Friday nights and we had dinner together, simple meals that did not require much effort. We went for walks along the river and sat on benches and watched the water move slowly past. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky was turning orange and pink, he asked me if I had any regrets. No, I said. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. He nodded. That is the right answer. I looked out at the river, the light glinting off the surface. Do you ever think about what comes next sometimes, he said. But I have learned not to plan too far ahead. It never works out the way you expect. That sounds like experience talking. It is. I spent a lot of years planning for things that never happened. I am done with that. We sat in silence for a while, watching the last of the light fade from the sky. I thought about the life I had built, the small and steady life that was mine alone. It was not dramatic or exciting. It was not the kind of life that made for a good story. But it was real. It was solid. It was something I had created with my own hands and my own choices. The next week, I went back to the courthouse. Not for a hearing, not for a trial, but to pick up a copy of the final ruling. I had never seen the official document, the one that spelled out in legal language everything the judge had decided. I wanted to hold it in my hands, to see the words on paper, to make it real. The clerk handed me the document without comment. I walked outside and sat on the steps, the same steps I had walked down 6 months ago, and I read through the pages. The language was dry and formal, full of legalese and citations, but the meaning was clear. The conservatorship petition had been denied. The appeal had been dismissed. My parents had been ordered to pay my legal fees. The ruling was final and could not be overturned. I folded the document and put it in my bag, and I sat there on the steps for a long moment. The sun was warm on my face. The traffic moved along the street. A woman walked past with a stroller and a toddler who was crying about something I could not understand. Normal life. Ordinary life. The kind of life I had always wanted and never thought I would have. David found me there an hour later. He had called and I had not answered, so he had come looking. He sat down beside me on the steps and did not ask why I was there. I picked up the final ruling. I said, "Are you okay?" "I am fine. I just wanted to see it. To make sure it was real." He nodded and waited. He always waited. "I spent so long being afraid," I said. Afraid they were right. Afraid I was broken. Afraid I would never be able to make it on my own. And now I am here, and I am fine, and they are the ones who are still angry. Anger takes a lot of energy, David said. Eventually they will run out. I hope so. For their sake. He looked at me with that steady, unreadable gaze of his. You do not hate them. No, I said. I do not hate them. I just do not need them anymore. We sat on the steps until the sun route to set, and then we walked back to the diner for coffee and pie. Jenny was behind the counter, and she looked at me with that knowing smile of hers. You look different, she said. You already said that. I know. I meant it then and I mean it now. I laughed and slid onto a stool, and David sat beside me, and we ordered coffee and cherry pie and talked about nothing important. The diner was warm and full of the usual noise, the clatter of plates and the murmur of conversations and the hiss of the grill. It was ordinary. It was perfect. Later, walking home in the dark, David took my hand. We did not talk. We just walked, our footsteps matching, the streetlights casting long shadows ahead of us. When we reached my building, he stopped at the bottom of the steps. Are you happy? He asked. I thought about it. I thought about the months of preparation, the sleepless nights, the constant weight of waiting for the next attack. I thought about my mother's face and my father's hands and my brother's anger. I thought about the apartment I had bought with my own money and the job I had held for 2 years and the life I had built with my own choices. I thought about David, standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets, waiting for my answer. I am getting there, I said. He smiled, a rare thing that lit up his whole face. Good. Take your time. I walked up the steps and unlocked the door, and I turned back to look at him one last time. He was still standing there, watching me. David, I said. Yeah, thank you. For everything. You do not have to thank me. I know. But I wanted to. He nodded and walked away, and I went inside and closed the door behind me. The apartment was quiet and dark, but it was mine. It had always been mine. I had just been too afraid to see it. I sat down on the couch and pulled out the final ruling, the document that spelled out in black and white everything I had won. I read through it one more time, and then I set it aside and looked out the window at the city lights. I did not need my parents anymore. I did not need their approval or their money or their love. I had built something of my own, something they could not touch, something that would always be mine. The war was over. The battle was done. And I had won.